Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the season debuting Matt Rogers. Rogers, it's great to have you here. How the hell are you doing?
Where am I, dude? This is not a sex hotline. I thought this was a sex hotline. I got on a podcast. Shit. What's up, dude? I'm getting less horny, but I'm here. What's up?
Only slightly, though. I hope. I think our topic this week is a pretty sexual and a pretty horny topic, or at least a topic that makes me horny. With that being said, we're here to talk about the AFC West this week. So this will be part one of the AFC West. We're going to cover the Raiders and the Chargers in part one, and then part two will be Denver and Kansas City. I am leaving Kansas City for last because you got to listen to everything else in order to get there. When I was breaking this up, I was like, Denver and Kansas City on the same one. Yeah, going to lead with Denver on that. Going to not close with Denver so people just shut it off after Kansas City. And I'm going to conveniently forget that fast forwarding exists and is a technology that has been around for a very long time. But yeah, we're talking about the AFC West. I'm pretty pumped on it. Obviously, I'm a big Raider fan, but I do legitimately think that outside of Denver, I think Kansas City and Los Angeles are two of the premier teams in the league. I think the Raiders have a chance to maybe compete. We'll get into that certainly. And then Denver is just going to be a terrible, terrible team. And I have a conspiracy theory about them that I will get into in part two of this. Looking forward to next week.
Horny what? Again. Conspiracy theories. Horny.
Oh, there we go.
You brought me back.
I like that. So guys, if you haven't heard our latest episodes about the AFC North, make sure you are checking. I'm sorry, not AFC North, NFC North. Make sure you're checking those out. And basically, going forward, I believe we're going to cover the NFC West or the AFC South next. So keep an eye out for that as well. It is training camp now, which is extremely exciting. We have football this fucking weekend, dude. And so we're trying to get power through these divisions and get to sort of the news and analysis that is needed as preseason moves forward. Rogers, you got anything else, or should we jump right into this?
Yeah, I mean, we can jump right in, but I just realized as I was prepping for this podcast and I've been scheduling some of my fantasy drafts, I was like, shit, 4 weeks. Like 4 weeks away until my first draft. And it's creeping on us really quickly, and it's exciting. I'm pumped.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got my first big one on the 18th. So that'll be fun. That's oh yeah, it is your birthday. That's right. Yeah, cool. So we'll figure that out. But yeah, that should be fun. Drafts are coming up, and we'll make sure to get you guys all of the information and analysis and confusion for sex hotlines that you need, that you want, that you crave. Back to horny. All right, dude, let's talk about the fucking Raiders. So I think big picture here, not too many changes. They brought in Mike Mayock as the GM. Most people know him as the talking head on NFL Network, who has actually been like the most accurate draft predictor for like the past 5 to 10 years. But anyway, they brought in Mayock. They had, a somewhat tumultuous offseason, but they really have upped the talent level here, I believe, particularly on the offensive side. The defense is going to be god fucking awful again. But on the offensive side, they have brought in a decent amount of talent. So let's start with the quarterback, Derek Carr. Derek Carr was not good last year. You can make arguments about his pass catchers, and those are valid arguments, particularly once Amari Cooper was traded. But Derek Carr was very bad. He's currently going as the quarterback 23. That's the 7th pick in the 14th round. Do you think it's even worth drafting Derek Carr? Do you think there's upside there?
I definitely think there's upside there. I think that I would put him a little higher than where he's going just because of the upside of Antonio Brown coming in and the potential explosiveness of that offense. Like you just said, their defense is going to be bad. When the West Coast plays primetime games, it could be like 4-hour games and like 100 combined points all the time. It's that type of situation. So if you're going to go that route of like streaming quarterbacks, I think that he's a little lower on that tier of like someone that would be drafted. but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he's like fantasy relevant and in that streaming conversation every single week. So you could do worse. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good spot for him.
Yeah, I think there are a couple other guys behind him, like Dalton and Darnold, that I'd probably be taking ahead of him, just a little bit more upside in my eyes. But I think Derek Carr does have some upside. I mean, he's not a good quarterback. His career best adjusted yards per attempt would have been 13th, or tied for 13th last year. Like that's his career best. That's not what he did last year. And his career best QBR would have been tied for 23rd last year. So even Derek Carr at his best has never been good or above average, I suppose, in the league. But he didn't really have weapons. He checked the fuck down a lot. And now he does have some more weapons. You said they brought in Antonio Brown. They brought in Tyrell Williams as a deep threat. They upgraded the offensive line in a couple positions, though they did some perplexing things there as well. And they drafted Josh Jacobs, the running back out of Alabama. So they brought in a lot of things around him, and also he should just have a natural increase in touchdowns. His touchdown rate last year was 3.4%, which is very, very low, and his career rate is 4.4%. So you should see some natural regression there towards the mean. So I think, sort of in conclusion, there, I think Carr has some upside. There are some other guys I like a bit more, but I'm not against drafting him late in drafts.
So I'll pose this question to you real quick, Walsh, before we move on. Would you argue that as far as fantasy production or upside, that this could be the best situation Derek Carr's been in his career?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is arguably his best pass catching core. I mean, you can, I guess you could say, like when before Amari fell off a cliff with the Raiders and Crabtree maybe, but I would argue that I think Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams, and then maybe Darren Waller, who I kind of like. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Could make a very good pass catching group for him. And if we think Brown's going to produce, which I think I can safely say we do, then Carr's got to have some production out of that. So
yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. Let's talk about the pass catchers before we get into the running game. Sorry, I'm going a little bit out of order on this outline, but Antonio Brown, since we just mentioned him, he's currently going the 7th pick in the 2nd round. That's wide receiver 8. Do you think he's worth that ADP?
So that would maybe be where I would expect him to go, but I think this year, and I will probably kick myself going forward, but I think I'm going to avoid him overall this year. I don't know if I would love him as the wide receiver 1. There's a lot of questions. I think as drafts get closer, I think wide receivers in general will move up a little bit, and the 8th wide receiver won't be going 7th pick in the 2nd round necessarily. But I don't know if I want to pay that price on something that has so many unknown variables around it and something so new. And, even if you want to factor in personality and teammate locker room stuff and, the team chemistry, I don't think I'm going to pay for Antonio Brown there to be my wide receiver 1.
I think that's really fair. There's a way lower floor on him than I think pretty much everyone else in this conversation up at wide receiver. Just for perspective, he's going ahead of Mike Evans and Keenan Allen. I think I would take both of those guys ahead of him, and Mike Evans because I think Mike Evans has a really legitimate shot at wide receiver 1 this year, and Keenan Allen just because I think Keenan Allen is like rock solid and definitely does not have the floor that Antonio Brown has. So I mean, in general though, like he should produce. We're talking down on him, but I mean he has a chance to lead the league in targets, I would think. It's not like everyone's talking about the downgrade from Roethlisberger to Carr, and there is a downgrade, but like Roethlisberger wasn't that efficient last year. They threw the ball like 680 times. Like a lot of Roethlisberger's stats were just based on the huge amount of volume that he had. And I mean, in terms of efficiency, adjusted yards per attempt for Ben last year, 7.5. Derek Carr was 7.2. Like that's not that far off. So I don't know that we're really downgrading as far as people are saying. And even in that offense, Antonio Brown was PPR wide receiver 5 last year. So right. There's reason for upside, or there's reason to be high on him. But yeah, I think he's like pretty much where he should be, and I'm not going to target him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just feel like if I went to sleep tonight and I woke up in December and someone was like, dude, you drafted Antonio Brown in the 2nd round and that fucked your fantasy season, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. That's
Yeah, yeah,
more likely than him being what you hope he could be, which is wide receiver 4 or 5 at the end of the year.
yeah. I think I agree with that. And I mean, like, he's on the downslope of his career. I think you could say, not that like he's like a skeleton at this point, but he's not a prime Antonio Brown anymore. So
Yeah.
I guess keep that in mind going forward. The other guy that they did bring in was Tyrell Williams. He's currently going the 8th pick in the 12th round. He's wide receiver 55. Um, I don't really have a crazy like deep opinion on him. I think he's a deep threat for deep. I said deep when I wanted to say deep right afterwards. That's like so stupid. He's a deep threat for a quarterback that doesn't really throw the ball well down the field. So we'll see. Maybe it's been personnel. Maybe Tyrell Williams out there stretching the field can get Carr to chuck it a little bit. But I mean, last year the guy was low A dot, high completion rate, not really going downfield a ton. So I think if you draft Tyrell Williams, there's going to be a lot of variance in his fantasy score week to week.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the story of his entire career. Also, you keep saying the word deep and all these different words that remind me I'm on a sex hotline again. So I'm not
Right,
really.
right.
Yeah, so maybe trying, whatever. But no, I think you're right. I think that the reason they brought him in might be a little bit more of a not as deep route reliant as he was on the Chargers, possibly. Again, I'll defer to you as the Raiders fan. But I wouldn't doubt if he kind of comes into his own a little bit more as not just like a deep route run fly guy and becomes a little more of a route runner from things that I've seen. And not so much a possession receiver. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but I think that price for him is probably right, just based on that's probably where he finishes all the time. Inconsistency.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I'd obviously love to see him take a step like that. We'll kind of see how it goes. I mean, for perspective, guys he's going around are like Dante Moncrief, Anthony Miller, Paris Campbell, Devin Funches, Mecole Hardman, who we'll get to in part two, Deshaun Hamilton, Devontae Parker. So like, you're not really like you're not missing out on anything in particular by drafting him there.
Right.
Like it's not like you're going to be kicking yourself because you took Tyrell Williams in the 12th round.
Right. And one
And if
last
it,
thing I'll say on him is that I feel like way worse wide receivers have been opposite Antonio Brown in an offense and had success fantasy
okay,
wise, week to week. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. If Antonio is the primary concern for the defense, then Tyrell has definitely a lot of opportunity to get open or to face more favorable coverages. And we know that he's fast and he's big and he can do fun things. So certainly not a bad flyer at that point. The other guys that they do have on this roster are J.J. Nelson, Hunter Renfrow, who's a fifth-round rookie, Ryan Grant, Marcel Aitman. From what I've read, it seems like Renfrow is the guy that they want to kind of feature a little bit. He profiles as a slot receiver. They said that they want to kind of use him all over the formation. Tyrell's kind of been a slot guy at times in his career too, so we'll see how all of that plays out. Kicking Antonio into the slot is not out of the question either. So we'll see how all that plays out. But I think it's safe to say that a third wide receiver for the Raiders is probably not going to be fantasy relevant.
Yeah, I agree. I just had batting average statistics honestly down from Hunter Renfrow being a Padres outfielder.
Is
That's
he
what
still is he still on the Padres?
I believe so. Yeah, because he just wrecked the Mets last week. Like
That's right. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
But no, I agree. As I was reading up on this third wide receiver competition, because J.J. Nelson is always an interesting guy. We saw him like on the Cardinals and things like that. I was reading on Hunter Renfrow, and they were like, he doesn't have the best hands, and he's good, but his best attribute is his willingness to compete. And you're just like, okay, I'm not going to draft you.
Yeah, yeah. He's a guy who most of the people that I respect their opinions on rookies and particularly rookie wide receivers were not particularly high on.
So Don.
Yeah, exactly. Don wasn't high on him, and I trust Don's opinion on fifth-round rookie wide receivers. You're right, though. I think if there is a guy to keep an eye on, it's probably J.J. Nelson, just because we've seen it before, and we know that like he can get behind a defense. But again, Carr doesn't like throwing the ball deep, so we'll see.
Okay.
Let's move to tight end. We've got Darren Waller is coming in as sort of the guy who the coaching staff is talking up. They also brought in Luke Wilson, Derek Carrier, Eric Swope. So there's a lot of depth of guys who have been like minorly relevant for like 1 to 2 weeks at a time throughout their careers, which is weird. But Waller seems like the guy to really talk about here. He's a converted wide receiver in college. He is an athletic marvel. Um, and I think if he is going to play, and we will see throughout preseason how they use him, but I think if he's going to be on the field for 80% of the snaps, I like taking him like late round. If I'm not getting one of these early tight ends, like I'll take Darren Waller over Noah Fant or Mark Andrews or some of these other late round guys. Because I mean, Jared Cook is leaving a pretty significant void, and Waller is a guy who is very big and athletic, and on a team that maybe needs someone to emerge there. What do you think about Waller this year?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like you said, unless you get one of those top guys, you could equate tight end 8 to 30. Honestly, my rule of thumb is that going into training camp, if there's a tight end that I haven't really heard of before this, and then there's 3 other tight ends on the roster that I have heard of, just no. There's too much shit going on there. But no, I agree. I mean, like we just talked about Tyrell Williams and how Antonio Brown could be getting a lot of attention. I think it may be even more of a reason to draft him because of the unknown. And when you get to that end of the tier 1 of tight ends, when you're just throwing darts, like you said, Noah Fant, like whatever, you're looking for opportunities. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. At that point, you're hoping for the guy that week 1 gets 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. And, that's totally fine.
Yeah, and if we buy the idea that Tyrell is going to be a field stretcher, then trying to take the top off the defense. You have Antonio drawing most of the coverage, and who does that leave open? Darren fucking Waller, dude.
Right.
Um, we're getting pretty deep into conjecture here, but I think that's the point that I wanted to make. These other guys obviously take or keep an eye on the news. If Waller is not starting in preseason, obviously don't take your flyer on him. Like go elsewhere. But let's move to the other guy who might be able to benefit a little bit from field stretching and coverage being taken, in other directions, and that's Josh Jacobs, the rookie running back. He's currently going 12th pick of the third round. That's RB19. Now, training camp just opened, and Gruden said that Josh Jacobs needs to earn his spot because John Gruden is an asshole. But we'll see. I think the assumption here is he will at least be the early down back. And there is hope from some people that he can take some of the passing down work from Jalen Richard, who had about 80 targets last year. So are you comfortable drafting a rookie running back for the Raiders in the third round?
So I would say that I wouldn't get hung up on the from the Raiders because I saw last year, I was shocked when I read this, that even when the Raiders run game like wasn't particularly attractive all the time, I think like Doug Martin and Marshawn Lynch, that whole combo still had like 4.2 yards per carry, was something that I read before and I was very shocked about. I think it goes back to we've seen a lot of success from rookie running backs. I think you're right. John Gruden's an asshole. And I don't know if I would pay up in the third round because depending on how your draft goes, that could be running back 1, running back 2. I don't know if I feel comfortable. And like you said, things got to shake out in the rest of the preseason. But I don't know if I feel comfortable plugging him right into my week 1 lineup. But I would very much want to own him. And at that price, probably not. But I think that he'll definitely be a valuable fantasy guy this year going forward for sure. And I just don't know if I'm paying in the third round at all. That's me.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think that the biggest question is he going to get that passing down work from Richard? Because
Yeah.
80 targets for Richard last year. If Jacobs can take maybe 30 to 40 of those away from him, like that makes him so much more valuable in this offense. He's a guy who I don't think there's anyone really out there who's like he's not going to be a good NFL running back, and he's a total Gruden guy where like he doesn't have like breakaway speed, but he like fights for the extra yard. He's like a hard hitter. He like loves running between the tackles. Like he's a total Gruden guy. So I don't really have a doubt that he'll win the job at least on the early downs. But for perspective, he's going right after Derrick Henry, right before Kerryon Johnson. So for me, I'm on Kerryon Johnson ahead of Josh Jacobs. We'll see how that works out. I know that's splitting hairs.
Now, I
Um,
guess I guess in that tier though, when you talk about the guys going around him, it makes a little more sense. There's always that adjustment with like the Alabama running back thing coming into the NFL. I feel like too, that's like definitely overthinking shit and whatever. But
yeah, I mean the other rookie going next is David Montgomery going midway through the fourth round. and he's in a three-way committee with Mike Davis and Tariq Cohen. So like he's going half a round later and has way less clear of a path to playing time than Josh Jacobs does. So you could
You're right.
definitely do worse in this tier.
Yeah.
The rest of the running backs on the roster, we mentioned Richard. They also have Doug Martin, Chris Warren, who some people have said is 260 pounds. That's a big ass running back. And DeAndre Washington, who is more or less irrelevant at this point. Um, I mean, Richard could have his relevant weeks depending on how much of the passing down work they're going to give to him. And we know Gruden loves Doug Martin. So if Josh Jacobs really comes out and does disappoint, like, it would not be the most shocking thing in the world for Doug Martin to like take some early down work from Josh Jacobs, which is just like upsetting. But it's John Gruden. Who knows?
Right.
None of these guys are getting drafted. Do you want to draft any of them?
No, like if I'm at a draft and like someone's taking that last round flyer and they're like Doug Martin, I'm just like, dude, fuck you. Like, fine.
It's going to be Vinny.
Yeah, I know. But like, just like, okay, man, be cool. Be more interesting at least.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that about does it for the Raiders. Let's take a quick break and we'll move on to the Chargers. All right, so let's get going with these Chargers. I guess let's start with where it all does start, where life starts for roughly 17 children, and where love starts for those of us who like to watch a certain man sling pig in Southern California. Philip Rivers at quarterback. Was that a good enough introduction to him? Was that okay?
Yeah, I think it was good. It also made me never want to call a sex hotline again because that many kids makes me very, very afraid.
Yeah. Sex hotline should, I guess, encourage condom usage more. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. I started saying something and was just like, I got nothing here. I gotta finish it up somehow.
That's why I keep saying sex hotline. I got nothing else. So.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think we're both on the same page in that all of our material is tacky, cliche, and hardly even there. So let's talk about Philip Rivers. He's currently going at. I didn't even have the notes up. God, I'm terrible at this. He's currently going at the 10th pick in the 10th round. That's quarterback 14. Last year he was quarterback 11 on very, very low volume, but very high efficiency. I think this team is going to be good with or without Melvin Gordon and his holdout. I think Rivers is likely to do around the same thing, kind of low volume, somewhere from 500 to 540 pass attempts, maybe, and just very efficient. You know, I don't know if he can be as efficient as last year. Last year was a very, very good year for him, but I think this is about the correct price for Philip Rivers right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the book is out on him. It's the same thing every single year. He's on that tier of 10-team league streamer every single time. And I think you're right. He's got a high floor, decent ceiling as far as what he can do. But I also think like once or twice you're in for that like 4-point fantasy game. And that's fine because that's a lot better than, consistent streamers going out there. So I think Philip Rivers, I would draft him. I wouldn't doubt in this year that I'm going to get Philip Rivers a couple times because I'd rather have him as that like 13th round. I'm obviously going to stream quarterbacks every year draft pick than a lot of other guys with a little more questions around them because you know what you're getting here.
That's fair. I think like if like so a popular strategy when you're doing late round quarterback is to take 2 late round guys, maybe play them based on matchups. I think Rivers would be a guy that I would pair with someone who's like way higher upside. So for example, like a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen or someone like that who. Yeah, they might end up like a top 5 quarterback, but also they might end up a bottom 5 quarterback on the year. So Rivers isn't necessarily a guy I'm targeting if my other quarterback is someone who is also very consistent. But I think if I'm chasing upside in the other pick, then Rivers is a pretty solid pick there.
I like that a lot, actually, because my initial thought was like, oh, I would pair Philip Rivers with Derek Carr. And then I was thinking, as you said that, wait, which quarterback is going to get me 15 points and which is going to get me 13 points this week? But like Lamar Jackson is a guy that could explode, but if it's a bad matchup, Philip Rivers, I think you can count on getting you 17 points in a week on a stream. So I like that strategy very, very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's
so much, dude. That hotline. like we could turn this into a sex.
So much, so much. Yeah, looking through this list of quarterbacks, like if I'm drafting like fucking Mitch Trubisky, like I would want to pair him with Philip Rivers. Like
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that I would be looking to do. I think at that point.
I'm gonna do that in all of our leagues.
What's
That
up?
we have together. I said I'm gonna do that now in all of the leagues that we are together in.
Which is quite a few of them. But anyway, let's move on to Phillips pass catchers. We brought up Keenan Allen earlier in the podcast. He's currently going 12th in the second round. That's wide receiver 10. You said the book is out on Phillip. The book's out on Keenan. Very little upside to be like the number one wide receiver. But also, if he's any lower than wide receiver like 14, I would be shocked.
That is pretty much sums up what I was gonna say about him. Exactly. Like I would be very shocked if he finishes wide receiver 1. I literally have this written down. Will not finish as wide receiver 1, but will not be lower than 15 if healthy.
All right. Well, I guess we're on the same page then. A guy who's a little bit more divisive, so we should probably devote some more time to, is Mike Williams. So Mike Williams, obviously, due to get more targets with Tyrell Williams leaving, but the other thing there is that Hunter Henry is back. So we'll talk about Hunter Henry in a little bit. Mike Williams is currently going first pick in the 6th round. That's wide receiver 26. I think that's a little rich for my blood. Mike Williams had touchdowns on 15% of his targets last year. I know he's a good red zone threat. I know he can go up and get the ball in the end zone. That's an unsustainable touchdown rate. So I know he's going to get a ton more targets. Like if he's over 100 targets, like great. Tight ends on the Chargers only had 73 targets last year, and Hunter Henry's getting at least 80. Plus another 20 or so from Virgil Green, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I'm not sure entirely how many of Tyrell Williams' 60 or so targets are going to go to Mike Williams, and in what we expect to be a pretty low volume passing offense. We talked about it before. Like they're going to be a good team. They're going to win a lot of games. I think they're not going to have to pass the ball a ton. I'm not sure that I trust Mike Williams' volume to go up enough to make up for the natural dip in his touchdown percentage, which is just going to happen due to math.
So I would say, and I might be compensating because last year I was very much off Mike Williams and wanted nothing to do with it. So I might be I think that's exactly where I like him. And I think if I had to go into a draft and I take him as my wide receiver 2, I am down with that. Partially for your reasons, you're swaying me a little bit. But I feel like they let Tyrell Williams walk for a reason. They were completely fine. Hunter Henry's coming up, but Mike Williams is their clear-cut number 2. Keenan Allen has also had a bunch of injury concerns going forward. So, that could always be a thing. You don't want to draft based on injuries of other people. But, Mike Williams did over 1,000 yards last year with only getting 63% of the snaps. That's going to go up. So while you're saying his touchdown volume and things like that, his touchdown percentage will definitely go down, and I do agree with that. I do think that he'll be on the field more. I do think that, even though it's only 60 targets to Tyrell Williams, like you said, I just think that he will be more involved in the game plan. And I think based on where they drafted him last year and kind of tested him out this year, I just think he's going to be more, or last year rather, I think he's going to be more involved in the game. And I think that as far as his upside, I think that I'm fine with him right there. I'm explaining it not the way I want to, but I think that it's a little bit it's safer than other situations at that wide receiver 3 range.
Okay.
Mike Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly fine to like him. He was a first round draft pick for a reason, right? He's an extremely talented guy, and like you said, he did all that production on less snaps and less targets than you would really expect for the amount of production that he had. So I think your bet is sort of that he's more. My bet is basically that he's going to regress towards the mean, so his increased volume isn't going to matter as much. Where I think your bet is that he has the increased volume and also he's good, which is certainly fine to take away from last season. That's a reasonable thing to take away from last season for sure.
But also, I'll add something to that is that I agree with you that he will regress based on his workload, but I think the added workload and time on the field will kind of offset that. And that I think fantasy-wise, I think week to week, he will be a little more consistent than he was last year. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, I trust it more week to week than I do over the long haul of a season, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I'm looking at the guys going after him, and there's a couple of guys that I think I would take before him. So yeah, and just for perspective here, you've got Alshon Jeffrey, Tyler Boyd, Dante Pettis, Robbie Anderson, Allen Robinson, and I'm getting a little hairy here, but Christian Kirk and Will Fuller. I think, for those first five, I think I would take them ahead of him, and I think Kirk and Fuller I would consider, but I definitely understand the argument against that as well.
Yeah.
All right. Behind them, we have Travis Benjamin, deep threat. The other guy who's a little bit interesting is Dylan Cantrell, who was a rookie wide receiver last year who kind of shined in their offseason programs and then was hurt for the whole year. So we'll see. He's got a little bit of hype from the coaching staff. We'll see if he can maybe unseat Benjamin a little bit. I don't really have any interest in drafting either of them. Do you?
No.
All right, cool. Let's move to tight end. Hunter Henry, fourth pick in the 6th round, tight end 6. I mentioned before, I think he's going to have at least 80 targets. Is this the breakout season that we've been waiting for from Hunter Henry?
Yeah, it could be. It's the best way I would say it. I'm not drafting him there. It's as simple as that.
Too high for you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I don't think you're wrong. Within that range of guys, I don't hate him. Like, he's going a full round later than O.J. Howard, and I like O.J. Howard, but I think I'd rather have Henry at his price. In general, though, I'm kind of with you. I'm a guy who generally takes either a top tight end or just kind of waits and throws, something in the roulette wheel, basically. I might get out of that depending on the person and the spot this year, but yeah, it's really hard to project what he's going to do because he was out an entire season. He's never had a season where he hasn't been a part-time player. So it's the upside is definitely there, but there's also a lot of risk.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying with the tight end rankings and where he's going as far as like I'd rather have him over O.J. Howard at that price for sure, but I'm just not taking a tight end there. I'm taking a tight end in the first 3 rounds or I'm waiting until the 12th.
Fair enough. I definitely do not disagree with you. Let's talk about the running backs. We've got Melvin Gordon. He is holding out. The news right now seems to be that it's likely to go into the season. He is likely to miss regular season games from everything that we've heard. He is still going 12th pick in the first round. That's RB7. I mean, this is the first week of his holdout, so I'm sure that's going to drop if he keeps holding out. But at this point, do you want any piece of Melvin Gordon?
I mean, I don't. Like you said, more remains to be seen as far as the preseason progresses. But apart from the holdout and everything that's going on with that, I think from what I've read that he will probably or hopefully get on the field week 1. But regardless of that, man, I mean, he's had some serious knee issues. Austin Eckler is very effective. I don't want to pay a first-round price for Melvin Gordon. I would for the first 8 weeks of the season, but I feel like every single year when the fantasy playoffs come around and you really, really need Melvin Gordon, he breaks down a little bit. And he had the MCL issue last year. 2 years ago, had the knee issue again. Like, it seems like there's always something with him, and he's breaking down a little bit. And that's fine. The talent is there, but, like, I don't feel the need to roll the dice with any of that.
Yeah, for me, it just takes like with these picks, you want a high floor, and Melvin Gordon holding out is not a high floor because we also know when guys hold out, they come into the season out of shape a lot of the time. Not always, but like they're not with the team the entire time. But for a guy with injury history, a guy like coming like straight off the street and just walking in and like starting to play in games, like fuck that. I don't want that at all. To me, depending on how long he holds out, I think he falls below Nick Chubb for me, who is currently going 10th pick in the 2nd round. I think the when I'd start considering him is after that, which the next guy to be taken is Aaron Jones.
See, and I think that that's more to the point of what we're saying, that like for the first time in a while, I feel like that lower end of the like top 10 running backs are better this year than recent years. So like
I agree.
So like Nick Chubb is like, what would you? I'm going off the top of my head, but like running back 13-ish or whatever. And I'd feel
sorry, I'm counting.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but while you're looking that up, I'm just going to say that like Nick Chubb, while isn't as athletic, maybe not as good, like, whatever in that grand scheme of things. You haven't seen it before as many times, but I would rather have Nick Chubb too, just for the safety. Again.
Yeah. Also, you were dead on running back 13, and like that's pretty wild because like I'm really comfortable with like Nick Chubb or Damian Williams as like my number one running back. You're right. There's a lot of depth there.
Yeah, for the first time in a while. Like it
Yeah.
was a huge drop off in the past. So like Melvin Gordon, you had to snag in the first round because after that there was nothing. When you were talking Jordan Howards, which were like okay in the mid second round. So now like I don't need to pay that price if I can get Nick Chubb at pick 19.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes a ton of sense. So with that being said about Gordon, let's talk about Eckler, dude, because Eckler is currently going 8th pick in the 8th round, running back 39. Like that's going to go up. That's obviously not a price that you're going to get during your draft in a month. Here's the thing about Austin Eckler is he's fucking really good. Like
Yeah.
people are talking like, oh, Justin Jackson might take his spot. Justin Jackson isn't taking Austin Eckler's spot. Austin Eckler's been a better running back than Melvin Gordon the past couple of years. He's extremely efficient. He's really good in the pass game. He was a guy who last year had standalone flex appeal, getting like fucking 9 touches a game. Like Austin Eckler is a good running back. And if Melvin Gordon isn't suiting up week 1, Austin Eckler is a running back 1 week 1, no questions asked.
Absolutely agree with that all the way. Is that one he should be owned? Like you said, that price is fine and will go up. But if Melvin Gordon does suit up week 1, Austin Eckler is like in the 9th round, I think still. 8th, 9th round.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And if he's a running back 1, like you said, top 10 all the way.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm sure it's going to go. It's since I literally put these ADPs up last night in our outline, and since then he's already gone up 5 picks. So the price is rising, but like some guys going like right ahead of him are like the top tier of backups, like Darrell Henderson or like Latavius Murray. Like these guys who have backup roles where we expect them to maybe have like the classic like Tevin Coleman standalone flex appeal some week. Like Austin Eckler is a standalone flex some weeks as a backup, and if he's a starter, he is going to absolutely destroy. Like he's going to murder the football field. He is so good.
So let me ask you this, Walsh. If you did pay the price of Melvin Gordon at his current ADP and say he suits up week 1, say it's August 18th and it's still kind of questionable, but you think he'll get in there week 1 or week 2. You buy Melvin Gordon in a 12-team league, last pick of the first round. What are you paying for Austin Eckler after that?
See, I'm not really a huge fan of handcuffing, but I mean, like, if I can grab him.
Neither am I, but that's a surefire great start every single week for the rest of the season.
Yeah, maybe 7th.
That's what I was going to say. Like you buy up a little bit more if Melvin Gordon goes for him, just because you now have a running back start for the rest of the season, no matter what.
And like in the dog days of bye weeks, like I'm not opposed to just throwing them both out there and just absorbing the entire Chargers running game. And then of course that would be like the week that Justin Jackson does like vulture a touchdown. But that's the way fantasy football goes. Justin Jackson is being drafted. He's the 11th pick in the 13th round. That's running back 56. I don't really care, but like whatever, it's the 13th round.
Yeah, I look at that as Melvin Gordon, and what happens there remains to be seen. And if it's sketchy, then fine. If it's not, don't touch it.
Fair enough. I think that's going to do it for the Chargers. You got anything else on them?
No, man, unless you're going to handcuff your quarterback for Tyrod.
Not the craziest idea. No, it's not a good idea. All right. Well, guys, that was part 1 of the AFC West. We will be back with part 2. Again, that's going to be the Broncos and the Chiefs. You'll have to listen to the whole thing without fast forwarding to find the Chiefs. If you fast forward, the podcast will stop working. I don't know if that's actually true. It's definitely not true. Anyway, for Rogers, I am Walsh. We are Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Later, podcast. All right. I'm going to take a piss.
I got to piss so bad, and I want to have a cigarette, but I won't hold you up unless you
want. No, I could smoke a cigarette.
All right. I would have a cigarette.
Let's convene in like 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. You taste. Come here. You want to smoke a cig? That's all she does. She rubs up against you. Good.
What up?
Yo.
What is it cold?
What?
What's the weather like out there?
It's in my neighborhood. It's like foggy and like high 50s.
Oh shit, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Real quick before we start up again, I forget sometimes that Corey like doesn't fully know me, but like gets it. So like I text him when I went for a cigarette. I text him. I was like, dude.
Yeah, he read me the text.
Oh. I thought he was getting upset because at first I was like, dude, Walsh sucks so much. He's like, I hate him. Don't say anything. He just goes, what? Why?
No, he got it. He was laughing about it.
Oh, okay, good. At least all right. Because I thought for a second he might have thought I was serious.
No. Also, dude, check out this sweatshirt. Adam got it for me. It's that podcast I listen to and their voicemail hotline.
That's awesome. All right, hold on. I'm gonna rip something real quick that I don't want Shrek to hear about. But
yep. It's still recording, but
yeah, I know. That's why I didn't specify.
Mm-hmm.
My bad. Are you as well? You guys?
A little bit.
Hit it. Sorry for hammering the sex hotline thing down so much. That came to me like literally as you kicked it up to me, and then I just.
No, that was good. It was funny.
All right, let's roll.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the one, the only, Matt Rogers. Rogers, what's up, dude?
Hello.
That's a little more tame than your last intro, but we'll take it. It'll work. We're back here for the AFC West Part 2. A little bit of inside baseball. We were just doing the AFC West Part 1. We took the get more beer and have a smoke break, and now here we are. So this one will be fun. It'll be good. We're going to talk about the Broncos and the Chiefs. We're going to start with the Broncos, but make sure you guys are keeping out. We're going to be finishing up these divisions so we can get to all the news. Training camps are open, so it was great today. I at work, I pulled up Roto World's player news or whatever, and like for the past month or so, you know, you get maybe like 10 to 15 like player notes a day or whatever. And I was on the third page of player news at like 3 p.m. and it was only back to like their noon updates. So I was like, oh yeah, baby. I want all these updates about how Kenyon Drake has lost 5 pounds. Like, give me these fucking updates. It was really, really nice to get. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to enjoy it going forward. So very pumped on it. Have you been doing any of the same? Getting these training camp updates in?
I mean, I should. You got to send me some links and stuff, dude. Because currently, what I do is like all my fantasy decisions. Like you know how like that octopus is on ESPN for the March Madness stuff that picks like the thing. I do that with with my senile grandma. I'm just like, Grandma, who should I start? This guy or this guy? And she's just like, that dude, I guess. And that's
you go, Grandma, who should I start? And just out of nowhere, she goes, Jerick McKinnon. It's like, Grandma, how did you know that name?
Right, exactly. Meanwhile, she only watches like Fox News 23 hours out of the day, but she knows to pick Jerick McKinnon.
Absolutely. That's the way the world works, I guess.
Yeah.
So, you know, in these future podcasts, we will be going through the news. I guess the big news today was that the Giants wide receivers are all hurt. Corey Coleman tore his ACL and Sterling Shepard's hurt, so they might sign Kelvin Benjamin. Huge news, I know. Huge downgrade for Eli, who I was going to take in the 4th round, but now I'm not really sure as much anymore. Yeah, I can't continue with that. It's making me upset.
I had no opinion on any of it, and I did not hear about the Kelvin Benjamin thing. But I'm most upset that when you said it, I was like, I'm gonna fucking draft Kelvin Benjamin.
Oh God, why would you do that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it, but I thought it, and that's what's wrong with it.
All right, let's get into some teams that actually matter here a little bit. I say that, but like this first team really doesn't matter that much. We're going to talk about the Denver Broncos. So big changes this offseason. And actually, I'm going to get into my theory here in a minute. But so the big picture changes were sort of Vic Fangio is their new head coach. Fangio has been the Bears defensive coordinator, which is a loss for the Bears. He is a defensive genius. Hopefully he can do some things with the Broncos. We know they have a very talented defensive roster. So I think they'll have a good defense this year. They also brought in Rich Scangarello, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, as the new offensive coordinator. He is a Kyle Shanahan disciple, so expect the zone running scheme that Kyle Shanahan is so known for. We always talk about like the X receiver in Shanahan offenses and how that's so featured. I don't know if that really applies here based on the talent that we have. But the big thing there is basically, I think they're going to run the ball a shitload. I think the defense is going to be pretty good. And I think that plays right into their brand new quarterback because, as we know, Case Keenum is now on Washington, and they have brought in Joe Flacco. Now, Joe Flacco is currently going undrafted in fantasy leagues, which is insanely correct. And before we get into sort of the details on this, I'm going to lay out my whole theory. I framed it as a conspiracy theory. I don't know if it really is. I think the trade for Joe Flacco was a stealth tank move for them to be able to draft either Tua or Justin Herbert after this season, because we all know that Joe Flacco is washed and at his prime was about mediocre. That I know the whole Joe Flacco is elite meme and whatever, but I think they traded for Joe Flacco as a move to be like, hey, we're not really mailing it in because we're not like, playing some third round draft pick as like our starting quarterback, but we actually are mailing it in. And I think they did that on purpose in order to tank NBA style and get a very high draft pick, get a good quarterback, and then like once they have that good young quarterback going, then it's the second to third year of this new regime sort of new regime system, and then you have some familiarity and that sort of thing. And at that point, they will try to be good. Do you think that has any merit, or am I just out to lunch?
I actually do, now that you said it that way, because it also happened right after the Chargers finally are like putting it together to be a consistently good team, and then the Chiefs just like were like, yeah, in your face, dude. And the Broncos were like, all right, we had our moment. Let's do it this way. I definitely like that. I also think that Joe Flacco in the Denver Air may have a higher completion percentage on passes over 60 yards than he does like between 10 and 20.
I don't think you're entirely wrong on that. He is an extremely strong arm guy. He's been weirdly like very low in terms of completion percentage on deep passes the past couple of years. But which is his whole reputation is he can just sling the ball downfield. But at this point, I think he can basically do nothing of value. So we'll see. They don't really have anyone behind him that they're gonna like bring in and like unseat him. So it seems like the Flacco show at this point. As I said, he's going undrafted. There's no reason to draft Joe Flacco. Am I wrong?
No, you're very unwrong.
All right, let's go through these pass catchers. I don't think this will take long. The first one going is Cortland Sutton, 8th pick in the 9th round. That's wide receiver 42. Sutton last year theoretically should have produced. He had nearly 1,200 air yards, which is average depth of target times number of targets, if you're not familiar with that metric. But Sutton in his career just really hasn't shown the ability to convert any sort of targets or air yards to actual production. Like maybe that'll change this year. I'm not buying that it will, particularly with Flacco as his quarterback. I'm not fucking touching Cortland Sutton. We talked about Tyrell Williams last podcast, like would take Tyrell way ahead of Sutton.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I might buy a little bit more into Cortland Sutton just because I think that he's a better receiver than we've seen so far. And I think that, like, I'm thinking, like, career-wise also. I also think that the Broncos, to your conspiracy theory, with Joe Flacco, they will be down often, and I think that they're going to have no problem. While they will be run first, like you said, run-heavy offense, just like at the end of games, just Flacco slinging it, like, dangerously. And I think that Sutton has proved to be like a deep threat and like a kind of end zone target, not in the way Tyrell Williams has, since we're talking about him. But I think that like right in like the wide receiver four-ish, five-ish range, I think that I'd be okay with that a little bit. I would.
Okay. I mean, you definitely I don't think you're wrong with any of that. Like he's still a young guy. He might be able to convert his opportunity to actual production this year. I'm just not on that side this year. And the other guy who's going to play outside with him is Emmanuel Sanders. So Sanders, if you're not aware, he's being talked up in camp as doing really, really well, which is surprising because he's a 32-year-old coming off an Achilles tear. An Achilles tear is not an ACL tear. It's in 2019 an ACL tear is a serious injury, but it's something you can come back from pretty easily within a year sort of time frame. An Achilles tear still really isn't that. I mean, last year everyone was high on Deontay Foreman as the running back for the Texans. He still missed almost the entire year after his Achilles tear, and everyone's really low on him this year. And I kind of like him this year, which we'll talk about probably in the AFC South podcast. But if you're going to tell me that Deontay Foreman was useless the entire last year as a 23-year-old coming off an Achilles tear, and that I should be drafting Emmanuel Sanders, who's 32, coming off that same injury, I'm going to be skeptical. Like, unless he really, really produces in preseason, again, no fucking way I'm going to touch him.
Yeah, I agree. I think Emmanuel Sanders, I'll say this. I've been playing fantasy now for like close to 13 years. I'm not sure exactly how long Emmanuel Sanders has been in the NFL. Call it 8 years, roughly. He's like one of the few players that in all of my leagues I've never owned once, ever.
Really?
18, yeah, ever.
He carried me to a championship 2 years ago. He was like one of my big producers.
I know, dude. That's fine. I'm not saying I was right every time. Okay. But I've just never been about Emmanuel Sanders is my point, and this is certainly not the year that I'm biting on that shit.
Okay, that's definitely fair. Yeah, I mean, like, exactly. Like, if you haven't been, like, on him, like, why would this be the year to be on him? I know he's cheap. I know all that, but, like, he's really going to have to show it to me a little bit.
I'd rather have Courtland Sutton.
What's up?
I'd rather have Courtland Sutton at his price.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I'm off both of them, but agree completely. How you were saying the Broncos might be down at the end of games. They might have to sling it a little bit. The next guy we're going to talk about, and he has a hamstring strain right now on like the first day of camp, so we'll see like where this goes. But the guy that I think really might benefit from that is Deshaun Hamilton, who's currently going 8th pick in the 13th round. That's wide receiver 57. He's the guy likely to be playing in the slot, and wide receiver experts really love him as a route runner. Like, they think he's a very polished route runner. He's a guy who did get some production towards the end of the season last year, and he should be a target in the middle of the field for Flacco. So I think he might benefit from some of that. My concern with him as well is that he's going to have a low average depth of target as a slot receiver. So, like, on an offense that's not going to be passing a bunch, if you're going to have a low average depth of target, you're going to need an inordinate amount of targets. So unless this guy can sustain like a 25% target rate, I don't really know that he's going to be fantasy relevant. But of all 3 wide receivers that we're talking about here, I think he's the one that I would go after.
Okay, that's fair. And I won't go too deep into this because I agree with what you just said, but the way that I would phrase it would be anybody 2 years ago that owned Robbie Anderson, this is a safer play, like in my opinion. Like same idea, high, deep threat. Like, I mean, I know that he's got some slot possession type stuff, and at the end of the year he put some production together, but he's like a burner. I think that he should be I would draft him late as a flyer for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a guy that I think out of all 3 of these guys, particularly being that he's going at the end of the 13th round when, like, do whatever the fuck you want territory, he's the one guy I might look at a little bit. The other guys on the roster are Tim Patrick, who, if, Sanders doesn't get healthy, he would probably be the other guy in the lineup. And then Juwan Winfrey is a youngster. But again, we're talking about fourth and fifth wide receivers on a Joe Flacco-led offense that is likely to be run first, so probably not particularly relevant.
When has Flacco made a third receiver relevant?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer for you.
Yeah.
So moving on to tight ends, the expected starter here is rookie Noah Fant. He was a first-round rookie tight end out of Iowa, second tight end taken in the draft behind T.J. Hawkinson. Fant is currently going tight end 21. That's the fourth pick in the 14th round. I get the concept of drafting him because he's a good pass catcher. And Joe Flacco historically likes targeting tight ends. We know how much he was about Dennis Pitta during Dennis Pitta's prime years when he wasn't hurt. To me, Noah Fant is I'm not drafting him under any circumstances for a couple reasons. One, rookie tight ends rarely produce, and two, Noah Fant can't block. This is going to be a run first offense. And you're going to tell me I need to be drafting a rookie tight end who can't block in a run first offense with low pass volume? Just absolutely fucking not for me.
Yeah, nothing else should be said on that guy other than what you just said. So
fair enough. The guys behind him are Jeff Hireman, who had a brief thing of hey, maybe you can pick him up and start him. I remember the week that Jeff Hireman was the hot tight end play, and I think I touted him on the podcast. He had 0 targets, so who knows there? And they do have former Michigan tight end Jake Butt, who, if nothing else, has a funny name.
Wait, sex hotline again? We're back there.
Yes, we're back onto Jake Butt and the sex hotline. Yeah, there's no real reason to do any of this to me. I know you will hear people talk up Noah Fant in the offseason. I will say don't listen to them.
Yeah.
Where we do need to talk about people is the run game. And obviously we have these 2 second-year running backs, Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. Philip Lindsay kind of took the NFL by storm last year. He was really, really good in a surprising way, undrafted out of Colorado. He is currently going the 7th pick in the 4th round. That's running back 22. Are you in on Philip Lindsay at that price?
I would say so when we were talking earlier about Josh Jacobs, I would probably take Philip Lindsay. No, I would say right around there, actually, because I feel like they want to put Royce Freeman down. Like you said, it's going to be a run first thing. I still think Royce Freeman is going to be relevant. Philip Lindsay broke down at the end of the year. He kind of sucked in the fantasy playoffs era. I think he had 130 total yards and no touchdowns over those final 3 weeks of fantasy relevancy. I don't think it's fair to expect a workload of a factor back from him. So I do think that they're going to give
Merrill Hodge. Put up that tie knot, dude. Factor back.
Yeah, dude. Fat ass Windsor. Or whatever the hell I don't know what Merrill Hodge does. But
I have no idea what kind of knot it is. It's just always gigantic.
Yeah, it's huge and wide. Again, sex hotline, but whatever. I do think that Royce Freeman's going to factor in. And again, I might be biased because I loved Royce Freeman last year so many ways, and it just bit me in the ass. But I think that if they're smart, they're going to kind of limit Philip Lindsay's workload a little bit and do a little 2-headed monster back there. So I think that's a fair price for him.
Yeah, I agree with you, and here's my take. I think the price, let's say Royce Freeman, 8th pick in the 8th round, running back 40. I think those are both good prices for them because, as I said, this is a run-first offense this year. They're going to try and feature these guys. While Philip Lindsay was clearly the standout last year, Royce Freeman was actually good as well. Just because he wasn't as good as Philip Lindsay, who was averaging 5.2 yards per carry, doesn't mean that Royce Freeman wasn't good. They were both pretty productive, and despite not really being used as much in the pass game, they're both guys who can be used in the pass game and showed that in college. So for me, I think this again, it seems very counterintuitive, and it's against everything that I believe in to say that I think this team is going to be bad and you can maybe play 2 running backs from it. But I think this team is going to be bad, and you can maybe play 2 running backs from it. I'm in on both of them, and I'm willing to draft them, both of them at their positions. I would rather draft Freeman at that position than Lindsay, but that's kind of splitting hairs.
See, but I think that it goes back to what your conspiracy theory is, and I think you're right in what you're saying. That last year, I think the Broncos falsely thought that they had a chance at still being a factor in that division. So once Philip Lindsay went off, they were like, we're riding this horse all the way to try and stay relevant. Now I think they've kind of realized they're taking a back seat and they want to develop. And I think they're going to go back to their original game plan of we drafted Royce Freeman this way for a reason. Philip Lindsay is obviously a standout surprise. And I think they're going to go more back to their roots, for lack of a better term, and try and develop these guys. And I don't think Royce Freeman is going to be as much of a afterthought as he was this past year.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like how you were saying, like, oh, the team will be down and they might be like willing to throw it around at the end of the game. Part of feeding into my conspiracy theory again is like, will they? Or will they just be one of those teams that just kind of like sticks to the game plan and they're down 28-7 and with 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and Freeman's getting a carry for 6 yards.
Right.
Like I don't really know entirely what to expect, but I think they're going to kind of stick to the deal here a little bit and stick to like the principle of this because I really, really don't think the Broncos are trying to win games this year.
No, you're right. I think they are very aware they're going to be a 5-win team, and they're just like, let's do that, win 5 games, and hopefully be good in 2 years. And part of that will be preserving Philip Lindsay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be like it's yeah. I mean, we've said it all at this point. I've said what I needed to, but yeah, I think we're both pretty much on the same page of just like Broncos running backs, not a bad investment here. They also have Devontae Booker and David Williams behind that, who knows, he'll probably get cut. One thing I will say, I mean, Booker got like a weird amount of snaps last year, even with Lindsay and Freeman being productive, just because I guess he's a good like pass blocker. I don't think that's going to be recreated this year. I don't think you need to worry about that. I think it's the Lindsay and Freeman show.
Yeah, I think it's just a curse of Denver that the third running back, it's the Ronnie Hillman curse. Third running back will always just get the fuck up in there and ruin your shit with whatever you do. But
it's definitely possible. We'll see how it all shakes out. You got anything else on the Broncos?
No.
All right, let's move to the main event of the evening. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs were incredible last year. The offense was incredible. And while I don't know if Pat Mahomes is going to throw 53 touchdowns, I do know that this is still going to be a very, very good offense, particularly now that we know that Tyreek Hill is not going to be suspended, which not going to get too far into that, but insane to me. But this guy is supposedly going to play 16 games. So let's start with Mahomes. He's quarterback one. Obviously that's deserved. 6th pick in the 3rd round. Are you going to take a quarterback in the 3rd round this year?
No, dude. No. I mean, does it make sense? I get why it's happening, with what happened. He's got regression is inevitable. That's without, you don't even have to say that. I mean, 3 times in the history of the NFL, someone has thrown 50-plus touchdowns to third. I think 13 times someone's thrown 40-plus touchdowns. So I don't know where Patrick Mahomes is going to fall in that. It's going to be a drop-off. I can't remember the last time a quarterback went back-to-back number 1 fantasy quarterback ever.
It's like hasn't happened in over a decade.
Yeah, and like for me, if someone told me that Patrick Mahomes is going like in the 6th round right there, which I still think is too rich for a quarterback, then maybe I'll bite and look at it that way. But the flex situation and getting that sort of roster fill out is so much more important than getting a guy like I can't even cite anybody, but just no. I'm not going to own Patrick Mahomes because everybody else is going to be more ballsy than me this year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we play in our main league. It is a late quarterback league, and like Mahomes might not go to the 5th or 6th round there. And I think it's safe to say me and you will probably still not own him. I mean, he's going right in between T.Y. Hilton and Amari Cooper. He's going before Zach Ertz, before George Kittle.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, I don't think it's insane to draft Ertz or Kittle in the early 2nd round, and I am not taking Mahomes that high. It's
decent money just on everything we've seen in the history of football that Patrick Mahomes is not going to finish the season as quarterback 1.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be very, very unlikely, which I am quietly on team Deshaun Watson quarterback one ahead of Pat Mahomes.
Okay.
But even if I wasn't, like, third round is just too high for a quarterback. It's just the way that things work. It's the way that fantasy works.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about his pass catchers. We mentioned Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is not going to be suspended, and since then his ADP has skyrocketed. So I'll double check now, but as of last night when I put this outline together, he was same spot. So he is wide receiver 5, 12th pick in the first round. I don't think I mentioned this. If you listen to us, you know where our ADPs are from Fantasy Football Calculator 12 team PPR ADP. Do you like Tyreek Hill that high? He's going ahead of Odell Beckham.
So the inverse of what I said about Emmanuel Sanders, how I never owned him. Since Tyreek Hill has come into the league, I've owned him in the league that we are, our main league with the whole podcast, every single year. I buy him all over the place. If I had 5th pick overall, I'm not saying this with knowing the running back situation. I have to look at it a little closer, but I'm taking Tyreek Hill in the first round. Easy, hands down. If I know that he's not getting suspended, playing 16 games, absolutely, dude.
Okay, that's completely fair.
I pick in the first round. If it's after 4, I'm taking Tyreek Hill.
Wow. I mean, there you go. That's as ringing of an endorsement as you can get. I think the thing with Tyreek Hill, and I'm the exact opposite, where I have never owned him, and it's because I've always just been like, oh, he's going to come back to earth. He's always been like this otherworldly efficiency guy, where even on like 5 targets in like down games, he'll still get you a good game. And until now, I've basically until like midway through last year, I was like, oh yeah, he's like going to come back down to earth at some point. And at this point, we just have to accept that Tyreek Hill is unique to every other wide receiver that has ever been in the league. He is the best deep threat of any deep threat. He's not like anyone else. There's no other way to put it. So yeah, Tyreek Hill. I mean, I'm probably not going to own him because you just said you're going to take him ahead of me. But, what was that?
I said I will buy him anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. And you're not wrong too, because he's just completely otherworldly. Yeah, I mean, there's not too much else to say other than that. You really can't pay too high a price for him.
The way I'll just to wrap that up with him is that he's got that Antonio Brown situation where, yes, he's got a high floor and he's elite, obviously, and going to put up monster wide receiver numbers, but he will win you weeks with like 35, 40 PPR points every now and then, relatively consistently for what 40-point weeks are in PPR. Like he's good for 2 or 3 of those every single year, it seems. And while we were talking about Pat Mahomes, that I do think he's going to drop off a little bit, I mean, this is an offense that last year averaged 35 points per game. Like that's something where you're going to take a slot type wide receiver speedster that can put up those numbers on an offense that monstrous and that high powered. Like what are you choosing over that? Who's going number 1? Who's going number 2? That's how I look at it. Is that this guy is just as good as that? That's my thing personally.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I mean, there are other wide receivers that I would take over him, but no one else in the league is more likely to get you 150 yards and 3 touchdowns than Tyreek Hill is.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much in perpetuity until he falls off, I think. The next guy that we have here, Sammy Watkins, 12th pick in the 7th round, wide receiver 34. I find it exhausting to try to have an opinion on Sammy Watkins. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to end up with him unless, like, he really falls farther. I know it's this great offense and everything. I can't have a take on him.
Yeah, I've thought for a few hours over this whole podcast. He was the one that I didn't really know what to say, and you said exactly what I needed to say. I just don't. I'm tired of talking about this dude.
Yeah, I mean, he got hurt midway through last year as well, so there's that. That seems to be a thing that he does. He might get you some valuable weeks. He might get you some wide receiver 2 weeks. To me, it's not worth it when there are just always other guys on the board that I would rather have.
Here's how I'll describe Sammy Watkins real quick would be if you have him, you feel like you have to start him because you don't want to miss that great week that he's going to inevitably have. But also, if you are ever going against somebody and they put Sammy Watkins in there, you're like, oh, hell yeah. I
Oh
love
yeah,
dude who's playing Sammy Watkins against me. Idiot.
yeah, 100%. And I think he's sort of looking at the ADPs. He's kind of like almost like on a fulcrum of like guys I want and guys I don't want. Because going right ahead of him are the Christian Kirk and Will Fullers of the world. Sterling Shepard's there too. I don't really have an opinion there. But then like after him, like Larry Fitzgerald, Geronimo Allison, who I actually am high on, like Marvin Jones, Corey Davis, MVS, D.D. Westbrook. Like I don't know, like all of those guys that I just said, I would rather have ahead of Sammy
See,
Watkins.
because I look at Sammy Watkins as this. I have owned him a couple times, and I begrudgingly start him. Like I never want to. He's like a dead weight on my bench, even if he has value, because I'm like, I never want to buy into this ever, ever.
How the fuck, and just like looking at the ADPs, how the fuck are Kiki Cutie and Curtis Samuel going after him? My
Dude,
goodness.
I would start each of them every week. I would start a lot worse players over Watkins every week, partially like because I just don't want him to burn me, but I never would feel good about it. And he also sucks because you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
You're like, I feel like I got to throw him in that wide receiver 4 flex conversation. And you know you shouldn't, but you feel like you have to. And that's the worst part about owning him is he's dead.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we talked about how we didn't particularly want to own Tyrell Williams. I might rather own Tyrell Williams. He's going in the 12th round. Like it's
Hell,
not.
hell yeah.
It's
I'd rather own Deshaun Hamilton, dude.
yeah. It's not a situation I really want any part of. The other guy going off the board, and I think this will stop soon, but Mecole Hardman is currently going the 10th pick in the 12th round. That's wide receiver 56. He was drafted, and I think it's clear at this point that he was drafted as sort of insurance if Tyreek does not play. Not that anyone can replace Tyreek, but he is in the Tyreek mold. And to me, if Tyreek's playing, like completely worthless, should not be drafted.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
That sounded so mean when I said it. Mecole Hardman, if you're listening, which you are not, I do not think you're completely worthless. Um, that was just in the terms of fantasy football. Anyway, go ahead.
so tunnel vision that I think if they had a second receiver that was better than Sammy Watkins, he wouldn't be relevant. But it's just that Sammy Watkins sucks so much that he's relevant.
So here's, I guess, another take here. I think Demarcus Robinson like might be able to beat out Sammy Watkins. Demarcus Robinson, I think, like is like kind of good. He's not getting drafted at all, and like they're not going to roll out in 3 wide receiver sets. They're not rolling out Hill, Watkins, and Hardman because Hardman is a Hill clone. So you don't need him in that sense. Like Robinson to me becomes the third wide receiver there, and if he's on the field, I kind of like him to be more productive than Watkins. Is that a crazy take?
No, not at all. And I think at the very least, maybe early on it is like if you drafted that way, people might be like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" But like
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going up into the 7th round to take Demarcus Robinson.
no. I'm saying if you took him like late as a flyer, week 6, I think that conversation is way different than draft time. You know what I mean? Like I think that he could be way more relevant season long, but it's just week 1 and drafting. Are you going to own him on your team? No, you want to keep an eye on him. But
Yeah,
I would not be shocked by what you just said at all.
he might be like depending on how the next month or so goes, but he might be like a 14th round flyer for me in some drafts. Like I don't think that's like completely out of the question at this point.
Am I wrong in saying that he may be tied with Tyreek Hill, but is he the longest tenured Chiefs receiver?
He's longer. He's longer than Watkins, I think.
I know he's longer than Watkins for sure.
Yeah, and I mean,
2-3 years, but
part of that too is he's guaranteed a roster spot. He's their kick returner.
right.
He's a guy who's gonna be there, and like if he's getting on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, color me intrigued there.
And especially for the price.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting him basically for free, whereas you're getting Watkins for the same price as all those wide receivers we talked about, as well as the same price as like Latavius Murray and Austin Eckler. Like. All right, so I think we're in pretty solid agreement on that. There's not a ton of discussion to be had at tight end. Travis Kelce is obviously the tight end 1. I think the one question you said at pick 5, you would be willing to take Tyreek Hill. How early are you willing to take Travis Kelce?
All right, so you called my shit because there's no reasonable theory to differentiate the two with what I said about Tyreek Hill. But as a man that is taking Gronk in the second round in a less of an upside, like attractive situation, I'm taking Travis Kelce. Like, say I'm in a 12-team PPR league. I wouldn't want to go first round, but I could. I would say like 15, top 15 pick overall.
Okay. See, I think and looking right now at like the how everything kind of lays out, I think 10th pick I'd be willing to take Travis Kelce because that's behind the top 4 running backs. It's behind David Johnson and it's behind DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and Julio Jones. I think I take Travis Kelce right there.
See, I wanna say this because I've started. This is also self-reflective. Why would I not take Travis Kelce over Julio Jones or David Johnson at this point?
I mean,
I think that I like Travis Kelce more.
yeah, I can't make an argument against it. I mean, in it, we always talk about how you can stream tight ends and you should wait on tight ends and try and see like what can hit. But if you have an elite tight end, that is a game changing thing every
That's a
single week.
luxury that is better than. I'm not going to make references that I would have in the past about sex hotlines, but that's a luxury. That is a luxury that is unknown to most people in your league of fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, Kelsey's getting you 5 catches and 55 yards on his worst weeks. Like that's just what he's doing, and his top weeks are going to be 2 touchdowns and 120 yards. So
Yeah,
I mean, like that kind of production from tight end. When there are people who are streaming tight end and getting fat zeros out of Jeff Hireman, like it
yeah.
seems worth it to me.
Kelce, I would equate Kelce on a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 type start as far as value. If like
Yeah.
they got rid of the tight end position and it was all lumped into whatever, Travis Kelce is a top 11 wide receiver for me. You know?
Oh, 100%. I'm taking him over Antonio Brown if he's a wide receiver.
Right. Exactly. That's what.
Like it's I've talked about this with Shrek on these podcasts. I don't think it's insane to take Kelsey and your pick of Ertz and Kittle as like a swing. If you can play tight end at flex as the 1-2 swing, like it's not my preferred strategy. I don't think it's crazy.
Would you rather draft Travis Kelce or Melvin Gordon?
Travis Kelsey, 100%.
That says it right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if you can tell, we like him. He's pretty good.
That dude's hot.
That's also true. He's hot, and I think he's funny. So he's got everything working for him. He's a great tight end, gets you a lot of fantasy points, very attractive, and probably a funny dude. So there you go.
Yep.
They also have Blake Bell behind him, who is a funny or like he's like a guy who like, I think he's a former basketball guy who like people thought was going to be like maybe the next Jimmy Graham at some point. It just tickled my fancy that he was there. But anyway, doesn't matter. Let's talk about the running backs. Damian Williams, how high are you going on him?
So I think I'm going exactly where he is.
Okay.
Solely because I don't think that he is great as far as like the past Chiefs running back. So I'm looking at it this way, theory. And Andy Reid, and more specifically Chiefs running back right now, is a top tier, top 10 running back every single week, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that Damian Williams is the least skilled in that situation that we've seen in a long time. And I don't know if he has the ability to be health-wise sustainable for a full season. But the way that offense rolls with targets and check downs and receiving yards and receptions for the running back makes it extremely attractive to me. That I think that you can't justify. I would say this: you can't justify not drafting him there more than you can justify drafting him. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. And for perspective there, I would take him, guys that are going ahead of him, I would take him over Melvin Gordon. I'd take him over Todd Gurley. I'd take him over Dalvin Cook. I mean, you said it. An Andy Reid number one running back is going to be a top 10 running back every week. So if Damian Williams is in that role, which I think he is going to be, then it just makes complete sense to take him where he's going.
Right.
And the reason I know some people are, like, what if he doesn't keep the job or that kind of thing? Here's the thing: Carlos Hyde fucking sucks. He's a bad running back, like at NFL level. Again, Carlos Hyde, if you're listening, I don't have anything against you. Carlos Hyde was outperformed by Matt Breida in San Francisco. He was wildly outperformed by Nick Chubb in Cleveland. He went to Jacksonville and didn't get any fucking carries instead of like fucking Corey Grant and TJ Yeldon. Like, he's not going to beat out Damian Williams for this job. He's just not going to. And like,
You play this podcast in the Chiefs locker room before week 1. Hardman and Hyde, they're just gonna be like, "Fuck these dudes." Dude.
Man, I fucking hate Walsh. No, I mean, they have some intriguing guys behind that. Like, there are people who know more about these things than I do, who think Darwin Thompson and the two Williamses behind Damian might be a little bit interesting. But for my money, Damian Williams is the number one running back on Kansas City, and I want to own the number one running back on Kansas City.
Yeah, and the Carlos Hyde signing was like very weird to me because, again, like what I said before, they're very into the checkdowns. They have a lot of targets to the back, and like Carlos Hyde is historically a very bad receiving running back. As opposed, like you said, he's a bad running back overall. That's true, but he is not a factor in the receiving game and never has been. That's why when he was with the Browns, Duke Johnson was relevant and all that. So it was a very weird situation that they even picked him up. I felt like they were hedging their bets because I don't know if Damian Williams can handle that sort of workload. That's my concern.
And we'll find out. I mean, he was their primary back for like the last 6 games or so last season, and he was great. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if Hyde gets cut and Darwin Thompson is the backup, in which case, like, I will start drafting Darwin Thompson earlier than the 14th round where he's going. Yeah, it's pretty simple there.
You shouldn't draft based on that because the workload is there. I mean, you could even go back to where people are saying, "Oh, Carlos Hyde is there. Damian Williams, who knows if he's proven." Like, we had Spencer Ware come in, like Charkandrick West back in those times, and like when they got the job and they got it through injury, they were the factor back. They're getting 23 touches a game or whatever. So Damian Williams, there's no reason to think that he won't.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I think I'm going to end up with a lot on my fantasy teams this year, just because I'm slightly higher than his current price on him. And if I'm drafting in that range, like I'm going to take him. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and what you could always fall back on is theoretically it's the smartest decision ever.
Yeah, I mean it's an Andy Reid back.
It's number one running back.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think that pretty much does it. Do you have anything else on the Chiefs, dude?
Let me see. Definitely no.
Fair enough. All right. Well, this has been a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed it. Rogers, before we go, again, make sure you keep an eye out for those last 2 divisions. That's going to be the NFC West, which I am pumped to talk about the Cardinals, as everyone I think knows, and then the AFC South, which I am pumped to talk about the Colts and the Texans, as I think also everyone knows. So keep an eye out for that. Rogers, you got anything else for the people before we sign off?
No, man, just very happy to be back in the swing of things, dude.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. This has been a ton of fun. Really enjoyed it. For Rogers, I am Walsh. We are Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Later, podcast.